Broker Bulletin acknowledges the traditional custodians of all the lands across the country on which we record our podcast and pays its respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Welcome to the Broker Bulletin podcast, where better begins. Join us as we chat with brokers about what's working for them, what drives them, and the real challenges and wins that matter most right now.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Broker Bulletin, the podcast for brokers by brokers. I'm David McQueen, CEO of Loan Market, and something we often see is that growing your business is one thing, but keeping up the quality, the culture, and the standards that you've set while growing, that's the real challenge. Today, I'm joined by somebody who's managed to scale, win, and stay on top while doing exactly that. He's built something incredibly special at Loan Market Edge, and many of you will already know him. It's a real pleasure to have award-winning broker Phil Rogers on the show. Welcome, mate. Great to have you here.
Thank you, mate. I might get you to do my intros for me, just to sort of take you along to parties on Fridays and Saturdays. It's quite good.
Well, congratulations, mate, on, I believe that you won an award very recently, Bankwest.
Hall of Fame, I know. So young too. It's crazy.
Yeah, amazing. It's congratulations, well deserved. But to kick us off, particularly for people who may not have come across Loan Market Edge and yourself, do you want to give us a quick snapshot? What does that business look like today?
Today, so it's funny, right? We have this conversation as of today. It's obviously changing constantly, but yeah, there's sort of 17 of us. So we've got the offices, we've got Gold Coast, we've got Townsville, got an amazing team offshore as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, sort of rapidly growing from that one-man band with a spare laptop in a Ray White office many moons ago. It's 15 years in business last week, actually, which is crazy to think.
So how did you, so maybe go back 15 years ago, how did you get into mortgage broking? Like, did you leave school?
No, never worked at a bank, never did university, no finance, just sort of sales, and sort of fell into it at a Ray White office with an opportunity. So was pretty much just a laptop in a spare desk in a Ray White office, and I was like, how hard can this be?
So how did you get the job? Did you like knock on doors? Was it just something that you saw and was like?
No, originally it was, would you come into sales? Would you do the real estate? Because I'd been sales prior, and I was probably just a little bit burnt on that idea. Yeah. And I bought a few houses along the way, and again, that how hard can this be? It was a bit of a baptism of fire.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I probably didn't have to talk compliance back then at the level we do now. So I sort of fumbled my way through. But a great journey, a lot of fun, and probably no preconceived ideas of, what was ahead of me and how to run a business.
And if you fast forward to today, how's that changed? Like, what's your role in the business today versus what it was when you had a laptop?
Yeah, well, as you can appreciate, anything, everything was probably the role back then. And now as we develop the business, and we made some really strong decisions a few years ago about, what we wanted, what I wanted, but what we wanted as a team out of the business. And that whole shift from probably broker to brokerage was a really pivotal moment. And we're maybe just on 4 years into sort of a 5-year journey there to Brokertopia, as I like to call that. But that was just about making a decision. And that vision is based around me having an opportunity to sort of be off the tools somewhat. Yeah. I think when we say that, we're never totally off the tools, but off the tools in general, where, some things that give me, passion and purpose, and, my values around, legacy and impact and the ability to give back, and now getting to grow a team, and grow people, that leadership and the BDM work and the stuff I really enjoy, and that really gets me out of bed now.
How do you get that back? So you've always had a really strong reputation for great service to your clients, but you've spoken there also about building a bigger, stronger business. And you spoke about getting off the tools, and a lot of brokers talk about the challenges around how do I build a great business while also looking after my clients. How have you managed to get that balance?
Yeah, look, I wouldn't say we've got it but having just getting really clear on what we want out of that and aligned with not just what we want from the business, but what do we want from our clients, right? And you're in this position now where nearly 80% of Australians now use a broker, and it used to be to go to the bank or do we go to a broker, and it's now sort of which broker, right? And why choose us, right? And why stay with us, right? And so from a client experience point of view, that's really at the heart of what it is we do. And whilst profit's not a dirty word, right? But you look after your people, they look after your clients. The two most important people in my business, firstly, are my staff, second are my clients, and then takes care of itself after that. So if you want to love what you do and who you do it with. So that ability to have grown, I guess, for us internally as a team and decide what we wanted and be able to really redefine the customer experience, so that we can enjoy what we're doing and we get to work with people we want to work with, right? And then from that has grown then probably what do we want from the business as well.
So is that the financial, like the revenue to profit, is an outcome as opposed to necessarily the be all or end all? Yeah.
Look, there is, we're hammered on this a little bit on a broker podcast, so I can talk openly about that stuff. We have a massive overhead as a business, and we would carry more staff than most do. But loving what we do and wanting to provide that level of experience to clients, well, something's got to give in there, and there's a balance. And so we've sort of really lent into the growth and have chosen to have a bigger team to provide a better experience, knowing, to your point, that the outcome will be organic. The business will grow, and we can service more clients and we can help more customers.
So you've been a broker for a while. You've seen some big seismic shifts, i.e. Royal Commission, COVID. I'm assuming that you haven't always been at the very top end of the game. When you look back at the 15 years or so that you've been a mortgage broker, was there a moment where you thought, this is clicked, like I'm there, like it's...
the flip side to that, was there a moment where, I probably wanted to hand the keys back, and I was maybe really rethinking what it was to have the business. And that was probably more pivotal around that 2021 mark. And then, talk about that 5-year plan, and COVID had hit and we wrote a lot of business, and that was great. But at what cost, right? And was I enjoying what I was doing, and my team enjoying what they were doing? And, it was probably, that was a really critical or pivotal moment around that, about making a decision about what this was going to look like going forward, because we wouldn't have lasted another 12 months as a business, right? So a decision like that was probably for me, you say the last 3 or 4 years have probably been the toughest we've ever had, but also the most rewarding, and we've got the most amazing team, and we've grown. And so leaning into that has been a real career highlight. And, it certainly, I don't know, that moment about feeling like, we finally nailed it. We talk about, when we talk to some other business owners, and we have this sort of joke around, I've got my gift, right, is a book of 100 pages, and 99 of those pages are what not to do. Right. And there's only one page at the back with a little bit of hand scribble with some notes of a few things that are currently working. Right. And I think, that curious nature of us as a business, has allowed us to move through a lot of those things. I don't really feel like I've got to a point where it's like, we've nailed it, or we've clicked, and this is humming. But it's celebrating those wins now. It's being really clear on what we want as a team and what we want as a business, and running towards that, not necessarily away from something.
I've noticed you speak a lot about your team, and when you do, you speak very passionately about them. Your role, that balance between mortgage broker and leader, where would you see yourself now? More mortgage broker, more leader? Is it a hard balance to get?
It is hard. The whole idea of like a selling principle in real estate, right? And, as a broker in a business, as a loan writer, we are also highly profitable. I'm the most profitable person in the business, right? But it's about that sustainability, or the model that you want, right? So the decision made around, which model am I? One-man band with a great amount of support, and I write my 200 a year and be really profitable and just chip away at that, or this broker to brokerage shift now. Probably the last 6 months has been the closest to, and going from, 40 appointments in 4.5 days down to maybe 5, and hoping to wind out of that little bit further. But now I have the absolute pleasure of having, 3, 4 other brokers in the business and setting them up for success and building their calendars and wins. So definitely now the shift is more on that leadership, BDM style work. And it's definitely the closest I've ever been to that next stage. We're not quite the Natish model where he was able to, Jan 1, just pull the trigger and step through the door, but very close to that. And it actually feels really rewarding, especially what we've been able to build around us.
Yeah, I think it's been an exciting time coming up. And I know you've built an amazing team, so obviously some of that's going to be hugely reflective of the leadership that you're showing. Looking back, we all obviously make mistakes, and probably all make a lot of mistakes. Is there one that you look back and think that's the one that's given me the biggest learning for your career?
Yeah, I think one thing I've learned to do really well is probably that self-reflection on a lot of stuff and really leaning into extreme ownership. Great book. If you haven't read that, jump on that. But it's, a lot of those lessons are probably built from how hard I am on myself around some of those things and looking at examples and going, well, was it that the team didn't do X, or was it that I hadn't given clear enough instructions, right? And so when I think about some of those mistakes, I guess a lot of those changes are probably about going, well, was I delivering on? Was I clear enough about? Did I explain? Did the business have the direction and vision that it needed to have in the early days? The answer is probably no. Right. And so whilst a clear and concise example of it's probably holding on to things. If I talk about it, it's probably holding on to things and not making decisions quick enough and stretching things out. That probably frustrated not only me, but more so the team, I think, because they look to you as the leader to be the one that makes the decisions. So if you were to go back and look at you're still young, but if we go back to your younger self, you're younger than me, so it's all right. If you were to go back to your younger self, maybe, starting or a few years in, what's that one bit of wisdom that you'd go, Phil, this is something that you should be really aware of? I think some of the stuff, what I'm really enjoying, I mean, the more you teach, the more you become the student. And I think now my journey when I'm growing the team and brokers and leaders and, pulling people through, there's been some examples there around probably operating rhythms and structures and the way that, we run our day, our calendar, our week, the perfect day, the perfect week, the perfect month. The more disciplined you are in one area, the more freedom you have in others. So I think getting that right, or at least, again, if we run at 60% of that day to day, we're doing an amazing job, right? So I think operating rhythms and structures is really important. I think having a plan, a business plan, and actually learning how to, part of that operating rhythm is a quarterly review, right? And having 90-day sprints. And I know that, things that I've always struggled with personally, and I'll use that word balance. I don't like it. I don't think it exists in what we want to do, but learning to celebrate the wins, right? And making sure that, I now sort of have a 10-week sprint and then maybe 5 to 6 days off, and just finding what works, and trying to stick to that for a period, that would be the wisdom. Write that out, understand what you want, and just actually run towards it. And because what you can't measure, you can't manage, right? We track, know the numbers, track a lot of stuff. It was very much a head in the sand, the first 5 to 10 years. The business wasn't started from a place of success, right? I was coming out of a space I didn't want to answer the phone for the first couple of years as private numbers calling, come out of a bad business partnership. There was things in my world that meant that I didn't want to know those numbers. Right. But if I look back on that time now and had I been across some of that, potentially we would be further ahead than where we are now. So you're speaking there, like I hear you using terminology like sprints and business plans, etc. How have you gone about developing yourself? So if I look at, there's a big difference between a great mortgage broker and a great business owner.
How have you gone about developing those skills that's enabled you to, as an example, implement things like 10-week sprints or business cases?
Yeah, I think I'm in the words of Jason Back, ferociously curious,
Yeah.
you know, in my approach to those things. And that journey's been a real one of self-discovery, and consume a lot of content. There's a lot of that, you know, wanting to constantly learn and grow around that. And it's simple. It can be things like the Room to Grow podcast, great podcast. Just got that in there. No, but consuming a lot of content, listening, you know, we live in a world of abundance when it comes to these things, and being curious about wanting to learn more about, and reading books and listening to, you know, a lot of podcasts. And it's really been about wanting to know more about that. There's a great book that I often will use, at E-Myth, and they talk about the technician, the manager, or the entrepreneur, and the three types of people you need to be in business. And some people are really good technicians, right? If we talk about loan writers, right, then you've got to be able to also manage people, right? Some people aren't great managers, right, but they're great technicians, and others don't have the vision to grow a business and be more, or even want more. And that's okay, but probably understanding which one of those you are, or you know, do you have a blend of two or three of those? And you know, if there's strengths or weaknesses, what do you want from that? We'll lean into that. You know, there are things I've been curious about and want to learn more about and grow in those areas. So I've actively gone looking for things like, and again, I get into rhythms, you know, 90-day sprints, and there's a lot of concepts I bring into business, and it drives the guys insane. But it gives context, to some of my thought process and where I'm taking it, and, you know, bringing them on the journey, you know, to the right people on the bus and in the right seats, and, you know, so getting them on board for those things. And it's got to be, because ideas are nothing without implementation, right? So one thing I didn't do well previously was a lot of talk, right? But action and that implementation was always really hard. And that's definitely one thing I really leaned into, making myself more accountable, to get better at that.
I heard you mention earlier just around balance and how real or unreal it is. As well as building a successful business, you've always kept yourself in very good shape. Like, you've had a good focus on that stuff. But how do you, like in terms of energy, how do you manage your time, your workload without burning out? Especially like when the pace is so relentless.
Yeah. And again, if you love what you do, it helps, but it doesn't mean I love every day, right? And there's two things I'm really protective of, and one's my time and two's my energy. So getting access into those is very tightly held, and that starts with my calendar. And it's the same with the team, right? I want to see personal life. How do we fill that calendar? It's color coded. There's only 3 items going in there, but personal goes in first. Energy management's really critical, right? Again, as we get that little bit older, sleep and exercise and prioritizing, like mental health is a big thing, right? Because if I'm not physically well, then mentally I'm not going to show up as the best person I could be. And so knowing those rhythms become really important on a daily and probably weekly, but then also going, at a 90-day mark, I'm really going to I've got to have something to look forward to. It's always been the way. I work remotely a lot, and if that 8 to 10 week sprint and that 5 to 10 days at the back of it, treat it like a professional sports team. Yeah. Right. And when you're on, you're on. And in season, these people, Tom Brady getting paid $40 million a season doesn't go out on the drink on a Saturday night for no reason. Right. They play their season, they punch through, they have their on, they have their off. And I think just knowing how you tick becomes really important to that. Everyone has a different rhythm. People might be, depending on those 4 or 5 buckets they've got, there might be more in family life, and often if there's more in family at the time, or something else has got to give. Right. And so just having an awareness of that's been really critical for me, and knowing that it's okay to not be okay, or it's okay to dive into a certain area for a period of time, but to be able to pull yourself back a little. Yeah.
You're pivoting towards your team, and again, you speak so passionately about them, and you have got a team of superstars, by the way, like really great people. What's the role that your team has played in your success?
Yeah, I think, one thing I didn't do well, and I think that's just the way sometimes people like us are built, is the learn to let go part, right? But as a leader, and the journey into that is learning to trust your people. And one of the most rewarding things has been watching the team grow, and the more trust I've been able to put in them, and allowing them to step into their roles. Talk about sort of freedom within a framework, and autonomous in that spot. And I think allowing them the chance to do that. Like, I'm surrounded by, whether say I never went to Harvard, but most of my team did, right? I'm surrounded by a group of specialists or rock stars in their area, and, being humble enough to recognize that I don't need to be the number one in that role, in all areas of the business. And so the right people has been really critical. Again, that whole thing about attitude over skill, love what you do, who you do it with. Like, I try to build a place where I would want to go to work. And I've had good managers and I've had bad managers, right? And so in that, good leaders, bad leaders, I know what I would want, and you try and create a workplace around that.
Just on that, and we've spoken in the past around post-COVID, how hard it can be to get people back in the workplace. Do you consciously try and create an environment where your team will just, like, they'll wake up and they'll want to be there as well?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no locks on the doors. I want people, this is that whole business of attraction, and we're going to spend a whole lot of time together. And I'm also really grateful of the time that I've had a lot of this. There's 12 years and 8 years and 7 years and 6, we've had people here for a long time, and that's not easy to do, right? And it's a constant evolution to get to that.
Yeah.
But it's a really special feeling when you get to that point.
Yeah. And you've done a great job at, like, retaining some really top talented people. So it clearly works. We're both sports fans, inch by inch. At Broker Bulletin, we're about finding that 1%, that 1 inch. What's the, what would you say is that one thing, if you were going to say every day, that one piece that has the biggest impact on you and your business?
I think the two things I mentioned before, and they're probably hand in hand, around the operating rhythm and the calendar. Protect at all costs, time, energy. Be really mindful of that approach. And if it's your calendar should be a representation. You show me a calendar, and I'll be able to tell whether you're going to be successful or not. So building that out with an operating rhythm that controls, a day, a month, 90 days, and an annual. People are like, oh, it's too structured, it's too much. But at least getting that 90-day framework right, is probably been pivotal to the success.
Awesome. Well, to wrap up, I say my biggest takeaway. A lot of time people will look at you like, you're a super fit guy, successful in business. My biggest takeaway is probably that, people sometimes probably look and think this comes easy, it comes natural. But what you spoke about there was the discipline. Yeah. And sometimes it's easy to forget that, like, the discipline around waking up in the morning at 6 a.m., going and exercising, going into the office every day, and having that discipline to be your full self and run your business. Like, sometimes people think that's easy, but actually that 1% to me is that you turn up every single day, whether it's in keeping your mind and your body, like, fit so you can perform. So it's no surprise, I think, that you've built an amazing business, and that's all inextricably linked. So it was awesome speaking to you, mate. And no doubt we'll continue to do that. And I do appreciate when you share other podcasts with me as well. So we'll listen to this one, and I'll listen to Room to Grow a bit more.
Thank you, mate. I appreciate the time, and always great to chat.
So thanks for so much for everyone for listening. And if you have a topic that you want to discuss, please email us at brokerbulletin@lmg.broker, or DM us on Instagram, or at lmg.broker. And our producer will make sure that we cover it in an upcoming episode soon. And if you do like this episode, please make sure that you rate it and follow us in your favorite pod stores. Thanks again, Phil. Great chatting, mate. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Broker Bulletin. We would hate for you to miss an episode. Subscribe to Broker Bulletin in your favourite podcast app. Has this episode been helpful? We'd love you to rate and review us. It'll help us deliver content that's useful to you and help others discover us. If you have great ideas for topics worth tackling, or have burning questions you'd like addressed on an upcoming episode, reach out. Links in the show notes. See you next time.